Morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the International Conference on Geographical Studies 2021. I hope you enjoyed our presentations yesterday, and I hope you are all excited to the scheduled presentations today. This is the third plenary session of the ICGS. I am Darlene Oxenia Gutierrez, and I will be your moderator for this session. Before we proceed, let me just review our house rules. During the presentation, attendees will be on mute, but we encourage you to interact by typing your comments and questions in the chat box. Questions will be addressed during the open forum. This session is simultaneously streamed at the UP Department of Geography YouTube channel and will be made available for viewing later on. Lastly, this session is being recorded for documentary purposes. For this session, before we proceed for this session, we will have three plenary speakers. We will listen to the presentations first. After that, we will proceed with the open forum. Please take note of your questions and use the Zoom chat box to raise your questions for the open forum. Allow me to introduce our first speaker. She is a licensed environmental planner and Tableau desktop specialist. She is also pursuing her MS in geomatics engineering and, of course, a geographer. She is also a volunteer mapper and founder of Mental Health Awareness, which aims to promote awareness by mapping mental health services to encourage people to seek help without telling others until they are ready to do so. Her presentation is entitled Exploring Soundscapes and How Sounds and Maps Can Show That We Care. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Miss Sandra Tabines. Andy?
Hello po, good morning. Mag-share screen po ako. Pa-enable lang sir pala. Good morning to everyone po. Share screen.
Should be okay now, Andy.
Andy, you're on mute.
Hi po. So, may white siya. Anyway, good morning again po everyone. I'm Andy Tabinas. Can you see the screen naman? Okay na po.
Yes.
Okay, so again, I'm Andy Tabinas and I'm here to explore soundscapes with you and explore how sounds and maps can show that we care. So first, soundscapes and sound maps. For anyone who can recognize this sound, is there any place or any location that you can think of when you hear this sound? Can you, hi naman po yung audio, do you hear it?
Yes.
So, meron bang nakaka-recognize ng sound yan? Someone said Hogwarts. Yes. Meron pa po ba?
Harry Potter.
Tama. So, ayun, correct naman po. So, that's not an exact example of soundscapes and sound maps in the real world, but it shows how we can relate sounds with places. So, to be exact, yung sound na yun is for for number 4, Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey, England. So yung start scene ng Harry Potter nga. Tama naman. So that's an example of how we can relate a tune or a sound that we hear to a place or a location. So, but first, what are sound maps and soundscapes? Sound maps, they give people a new way to look at geography and the world around them by associating landmarks and soundscapes. And sound, when understood as an environment, is a soundscape. It's a powerful tool that helps humans relate to their surroundings. Another example in fiction is from Cities and Memory Utopia, and it takes Thomas More's Utopia and creates something new from the collective imagination of artists around the world. So, sound artists each took a small section of the woodcut map of Utopia and created a soundscape. So, for example, dito sa portion na to ng map na to, this is what you can hear. So it's in Northern Utopia. So as artists imagined it, in Northern Utopia, you can hear yan, yung mga, dogs barking, children playing, kasi may field in front of a building. So also in the real world, there are also a lot of audible maps. So maps that connect the place and their sounds. Nature Sound Map here aims to share nature's most beautiful, interesting, and inspiring sounds. For example, dito sa Nature Sound Map, we can hear Palawan Forest Ambience submitted by a person named Cedric Mausgo. So it's located in Subterranean River Park sa Palawan, and this is what we hear. And think about sound represents environmental noise levels, how they vary by geographical location and are used to help shape local noise policies and provide others with an understanding of sounds in their local area. An example here. I think this is a street so you can hear traffic and people walking. And for think about sound map, there are also video. Some points on the map also have videos accompanying the sounds para makikita rin what the place looks like and you can hear what uh how the place sounds in or during the time of recording. I've had my traffic. It's still Glasgow. And here, Radio Apory Map contains recordings from numerous urban, rural, and natural environments, disclosing their complex shape and sonic conditions, as well as the different perceptions, practices, and artistic perspectives of its many contributors. So this makes it a valuable resource for art, education, and research projects, and for personal pleasure then. So an example here, yung title niya, Chimes in the Great Wall. So it's an unnamed road in Beijing. And this is what you hear in that road.
Hello, Andy. Sorry, we can't hear the sounds that you're sharing. So it might, hindi namin masyadong narinig. I don't know if it's on my end lang.
Okay. Wait po. Since earlier po.
Mm-mm.
Oh, no, wait. Let me share again lang. Ito, can you hear po?
Yes, we can hear it
Can you hear
now.
it now? Ayun. This one, can you hear?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
So let me just go back to this the examples earlier. Mabilis, mabilis. So ito ay necessities and memories agenda. So this on this portion of the map. And in the real world, these are the examples of sound maps. So for nature sound map in Palawan. And for think about sound map, it's recorded sa traffic, isa sa roads in Glasgow. And the last one, the last example I shared earlier, the radio operator. So as I've said, chimes in the radio. That's what we heard on this part of radio. Firenze sound map and favorite sounds are like simpler versions of think about sound and radio apparay map. So Firenze sound map here focuses on emotion, giving it a different twist to many other city sound maps. People submit recordings of locations about around Florence in Italy. And along with the recording, they offer their emotional state at the time of recording or how that sound made them feel at the time. And favorite sounds map encourages people to share their favorite sounds in their locations. These examples of sound maps show that unlike traditional methods of cartographic representation, which are based on a static and two-dimensional rendering of reality, a sound map is a tool capable of describing through sound the inseparability of space and time and the social and emotional aspects within these dimensions linked to the experiences of everyday life. Diba? So, yeah. That led us to create a sound map version of our Here map, mental health awareness Here map to aid in community care. But first, what is community care? Community care, it's about being there for someone, for people without them having to take the initial first step. It's being committed to being there for others and intentionally showing compassion. Community care, it involves more than one person, so it can include two, three, or possibly hundreds of people or in the community. So it can look like a lot of different things. So it can be as simple as reaching out to somebody over text when you think they need someone to talk to, or it can be someone grabbing groceries for you or buying something for you when you're busy, or it can be somebody taking care of your pets while you're out of town. or sa school, it can be someone sharing you notes of lessons you've missed while you're absent. So we thought na if there is a network of friends and support system that people know who are truly there for them, free of judgment, it would be easier for people undergoing mental health problems to continue living. And with a community of people who love themselves and want to extend care and compassion to others, we'll be confident na we have a powerful system of care and that we're all in this together, especially during the pandemic. So we had the first Here map actually, but this was not a sound map. For Here, yung una, it's for those who would be willing to listen to someone who is fighting a mental health battle and needs a friend. So anyone who is willing to listen it may add their information. Of course, yung public or yung willing sila i-share in the map. So if anyone needs someone to talk to in a difficult time, they may contact them. And but due to the pandemic, we were physically disconnected from friends and loved ones. And for some, the only way to communicate to them is through messages and chat. So we thought that actually hearing how someone or even a stranger can be there for you when you need them would lift anyone's mood. So the fact that one may see and actually hear that there's someone near them to hear them out about their problems would help address the recent spike in mental health problems caused by isolation and worry from the pandemic. So that's why we made Here too. Through this map, we want people to convey community care through messages for anyone going through something, a message offering to be a friend, or from a mental health professional offering free consultation. So this may not be your conventional map or sound map, but this is still capable of describing through sound yung connection nga between space, time, and the social interactions and emotions between contributors and the one who may hear their messages. So, ito yung itsura ni Here too. So, it has a day and night mode. And this is how people can submit their recordings through a form. And they can choose kung general message for anyone going through something. Or if they're willing to listen to anyone, they can share their public contact details, social media account, email, or kung saan sila pwedeng makontact. Or if they're a mental health professional, they can offer free services or share tips or add information on how someone may contact them. Yan yung night mode. Pero the same lang yung pwedeng makita doon sa day and night mode ng map. This is an example.
Hello everyone, I'm Frances from Mental Health Awareness PH. If you are silently struggling or fighting your battles alone, I just want to let you know that you're not really alone in this journey. Always remember that you're worthy of love and that your feelings are valid. You know, I've seen people go from the darkest moments in their lives to living a happy, fulfilling life. And I know that you can do it too as well. Stay safe and God bless. Hello everyone.
So that's an example of the sound sa Here too. Another example is our project Manila. So it's mapping soundscapes through participatory data collection. This one naman, it looks the same, but it's an interactive map that aims to help understand how people interpret sounds around them and the noise in their local area through soundscapes. This also wants to help shape local noise policies and plans. Yeah. So may day and night mode then, but they show different points and soundscapes kasi those recorded during the day and those recorded during the night are shown on each mode. And how does it help with community care? So when submitting the soundscape, the user would have to include their perceived level of valence or affective quality, referring to how they think the sound is good or bad. And aside from this, a soundscape map may also enable users to explore different areas and somehow get the feeling of being there in that particular place despite the lockdowns and isolation caused by the pandemic. Through the semantic descriptions of the uploader, the sounds attached to the location, and the photo related to the location. Yan. So this is the sample ng graph or plot ng perceived level of annoyance and interest levels. And this is the map of the soundscape submitted. So those with high perceived level of annoyance, none or slight to moderate. So just to share the results, we also added sound meter readings of the sound location. So, but due to a limited number of sound level measures, kasi that's during the pandemic and it was difficult to collect sounds, or our people submitted a few soundscapes lang. So, yan. Um, the the interpolated raster is skewed to have higher values in areas where the data uh, are low, while there are no data measurements of blue and yellow. So 29 out of the 40 submissions, there were sound meter measurements indicating the minimum, maximum, and average decibel reading, and yes, around 56 to 80. Tapos, it was also nice to listen to those with the green or none at all na perceived level of annoyance, kasi you could get a feel of the place, and it's nice to listen to the sounds of birds humming, of the roads around, or yung kahit hindi ka makalabas during the pandemic, you can somehow go to that place and listen to how it feels or how it is in that particular place. That's that's all po. Thank you very much.
Ma'am Dar, you're on mute po.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Andy, for your presentation. Kindly reserve your questions until our last speaker has presented. Our next speaker will talk about the use of OpenStreetMap and open mapping initiatives to provide care and support for vulnerable communities. He is currently the regional community mapper of the Open Mapping Hub Asia Pacific, a proud LGBT and HIV awareness supporter, a humanitarian disaster response mapper, and an OpenStreetMap volunteer and voting member. He dedicates his free time in advocating and organizing events that promote open geospatial technologies to support vulnerable and underrepresented communities. He is a proud graduate of the UP Department of Geography. Everyone, please welcome the founder of MapBex, Miko Tamura. Miko?
Thank you very much, ma'am. So I'll just share my screen. Ang weird pakinggan ng introduction sa akin. Okay, wait. Yeah. Can you see my screen na po? Is it visible?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, Ma'am Dar, and thank you for this opportunity. So my discussion would be on the use of OSM and open mapping initiatives to provide care and support for vulnerable communities. So citing some examples from MapDex and the OpenStreetMap Philippines community. So today we'll be discussing some topics, a short introduction to open mapping and OpenStreetMap. What are some of MapDeck's initiatives that provide care or CAREtographies, and what's next, and other open mapping initiatives. So that, okay. So what is open mapping? So based from various sources, open mapping includes mapping methods that acquire data that is free to use, reuse, and redistribute, subject only at most to the requirement to attribute or to share alike. It's also a global movement to create free and open geographic data. Beyond open data, it is a broad community partnership to collaboratively create a critical data resource for monitoring and meeting the sustainable development goals by making available fundamental, detailed, and timely information on where things are in the world. So the keywords here for open mapping would be very much open, which would be allowing to be accessed by anyone, anytime, anywhere. And the value of sharing that data or information is being applied to geospatial data, which has a lot of gaps right now, especially in the context of the Philippines. So why is it important? Because first, it fills in data gaps that are not really there. Open mapping allows other people to contribute in their own means and in their own ways without going through various and tedious bureaucratic processes or request letter. Sorry, sorry. And data is freely accessible and usable and updated quickly. And through open mapping and open data, local communities, since they are able to access the data timely, they are actually very much empowered to use that data for their own purposes. And at the same time, this data, this open data, can also be accessed by others and be used for the purpose of their whether it's research, the academe, or for planning, etc. So when we mean by open mapping, it also involves a platform called OpenStreetMap. Sorry, I wasn't able to update the link, but OSM is like a collaborative map of the world wherein anyone can access it, edit it, and update the data, delete information, or provide information through it. OpenStreetMap is like a big database of geospatial data. And it only needs you to create an account, and through that you'll be able to access the data information and also download everything that's on there. So there are various types of open mapping initiatives. So the first one would be mapathons and datathons, which are currently right now remote. Before, it was usually done in person while people are meeting together and mapping together a specific area. So for mapathons, usually they use a tasking manager wherein they map out their communities or a specific community outside of their area. And for datathons, usually there's a list of places that we need information, and we are looking for contact details, schedules, etc. In some cases, there are also field mapping projects wherein communities or NGOs or organizations themselves are going out on the field or to the field, and then they are collecting the data themselves and uploading it to OpenStreetMap. So pretty much this is the infrastructure or the process wherein how data is being used and how it actually is being, how data goes through and affects other people. So mainly, if there is data, there are people who are collecting the data and methods and tools there. So you have your field survey, location tagging. Some people volunteer the data of their location. There's also street level imagery if you want to capture videos or pictures in the field, and remote mapping if you want to map other places outside of your community. It goes into OSM, and then you actually map out this places, points of interests or places like banks, centers, natural resources, hospitals, fire stations, schools, farmlands, houses, buildings, and rivers. And then you put it to OpenStreetMap, and then it gets visually uploaded. It gets visually rendered through the data, and people can then use these maps or access these maps through the OSM website. In some cases, the data, when it's uploaded in OSM, other organizations or companies use that data to improve on their services. For example, in UP NOAA, they use the building data in order for them to identify places where it would be affected by flooding and storm surge and other various disasters. In some cases, it can since the data is open and easily accessible. For example, Grab has created a map where it locates the nearest pharmacies, convenience stores, so that when people during the lockdown would know where they need to go to access the basic necessities and they don't need to run around and look for it through other sources. And lastly, if that data is uploaded already there, it allows people, like the common people, policymakers, and communities to use that data and to decide, plan, or create policies for the improvement of their lives. So one current among these things that I've shared, there are current concerns being discussed or being talked about about open mapping and OpenStreetMap. So first, there's this white man savior approach of mapping. So people all usually think that there is this or white organization coming in and helping them, and through them they are able to discover mapping and the technology, etc. Very similar to the very colonial time during the 1500s. People see that open mapping and OpenStreetMap is mapping for those who are in power. Usually those who have access to the technology leads these initiatives. Third, there's an underrepresentation of communities on map data. So if there are types of places that do not actually show up in other maps, OSM allows that these communities to come in and put their spaces through OpenStreetMap. And of course, there's a digital divide wherein people there are a lot of people all over the world that do not have access to this technologies, even electricity. So that's why it becomes kind of more difficult for that data to be used by these communities. So that's why MapBex, the community that I founded, is an online community of volunteers advocating for LGBTQ representation and open data in various mapping platforms. It actually solves one of those concerns of putting the places and spaces that matter to the LGBT community and on the map, so that it could also provide awareness and and pride as well for the community. Through mapping, MapBex attempts to lessen the gap and be more evident and existent through the eyes of people. Currently, MapBex has a lot of projects which are very much live, like the HIV and support facilities map, the LGBTQ safe spaces map, pet spay and neuter clinics map, MapBex stories, and Map Philippines project. So I'll just go through very quickly with these projects. So these projects actually just came from the idea that there are a lot of gaps in the data, especially in the health sector, in Google Maps, in OpenStreetMap as well, and MapBex will use that gaps in order to fill in and to provide support for vulnerable communities. So among others, MapBex supports the PLHIV community through the HIV and support facilities map. It maps out various support systems like testing centers, treatment hubs, primary healthcare facilities, psychosocial support, and legal support, places where PLHIV can go to for temporary housing, and etc. So this this map allows to mainstream several organizations to expand their reach as well to the PLHIV community. So that for the sake of the PLHIV community, in cases of lockdowns or transport restrictions, they would know the nearest location that they could reach out to or organization that can help them. We also have the LGBTQ safe spaces map hosted by Queer Map by Kiku. And this map allows us to show safe spaces that have been identified throughout the Philippines and other countries all over the world. This helps the LGBT community that I belong to push forward its advocacy of passing the SOGI SC bill. This map shows the concentration as well and places wherein there are anti-discrimination ordinances. And this is being used by community organizations to inform policymakers and other people that there are a lot of LGBT spaces in this particular city. That's why we're advocating for the SOGSC, things like that. We also supported pet control. So we partnered with various pet control organizations through the pet spay and neuter clinics map. So it's not just the LGBT community we're supporting, but also trying to push forward other communities like the biking community, the pet control community, and other communities to go into geospatial technologies and to have that idea of putting their spaces on the map so that they can be more evident and existent in pushing out their various advocacies. We also have the MapBex stories. So this is a very special map, and we partnered with Andy and mental health awareness with this, wherein people could go to the map put a pin and share their story about love, life, sex, emancipation, and the experiences from the LGBT. This attempts to disrupt or cancel out the hegemonic view that all spaces are male or female only, and also mainstream that these experiences and stories are out there, and people don't know it. uh, I think this is a form of careography because it allows people to also express their stories and become as outlets of those things, that and let people know that their experiences are not just being experienced by them but other people's as well. We also have mapping projects tapped with disaster risk reduction, like the Unmapped Philippines project, because this tries to map out various areas in the Philippines that have no geospatial data. So last year, we were able to map 25 towns and municipalities that do not have roads and buildings and put them on the map. And this year, we're targeting to map out Tarlac. So as you can see, there's this red area. This is the remaining city that we haven't mapped, which is Tarlac City. We partnered with various organizations as well and youth groups with this project Mapa and Puno. So every 30 to 50 map buildings, there's a donation that we are giving out to plant a tree in Dumingag, Zamboanga del Sur. And pretty much for the next year, we're targeting to map out the whole Zamboanga Peninsula. So what's next for MapBex after all of these things? So yeah, we are going to continue on mapping gender neutral restrooms and expanding the HIV support map and we'll be getting support from DOH. So this was really the plan from the beginning that we weren't able to get because of the pandemic. They were very busy, I believe so. So they would be mainstreaming the data from their resources towards MapBex so that we could provide that geospatial support as well and database to them. There will be an expanding of, I guess this is very important, that community care is in the center of MapBex as well, as there is also a support coming in to improve on the interface, to improve its crowdsourcing capabilities, allowing youth and communities to tap into the map and also give feedback, reactions, or a 5-star to a healthcare facility or something like that. We would also want to mainstream PWD inclusion, as we would like to also ask whether the clinic services or support facilities that we're mapping have access or provide PWD access. Few last na lang na slides. So there are other mapping initiatives. We have Mapa Aralan by OpenStreetMap Philippines. Mental health awareness is championing the mapping of mental health facilities. And we have Sanyan PH, which got very loud during the community pantry era. While mapping community pantry, and this was an example of a very successful crowdsourcing initiative, which centered on such very beautiful initiative nga, yan. Ministry mapping focuses on taking care of the map makers. So this group pretty much is a support system for cartographers all around the Philippines. We have GeoLadies PH focusing on women, mapping women-oriented spaces like the help desks, breastfeeding stations, etc. And Mapatanda focused on the more elderly population and demographic. There are other various, especially there are also online groups that provide support and care in any of your mapping or GIS journeys. You have QGIS User Group Philippines, Geographic Information Science Philippines, OSM Philippines, and GIS User Philippines. So feel free to join if you are interested. Lastly, I'd like to present about the Open Mapping Hub Asia Pacific, since this would be coming in to support various open mapping initiatives in the region, not just in the Philippines. So I would like to encourage our young geographers and current geographers that if you have any mapping ideas that are very much involved in building communities, supporting communities, feel free to reach out to the Open Mapping Hub Asia Pacific and MapBex so that we could materialize your idea and share it to the community. So currently we have the booster grants being provided to the OSM Philippines. This is $25,000 to provide support to any community mapping event, activity, or project that you might have. We also have the She Leads and She Inspires championing women in GIS. So this is pretty much like a GIS leadership internship that we are promoting, and you could visit the link here below if you have any, if you would like to join, because we're going to select 100 women, and this is a great opportunity to meet and work with various women GIS leaders all throughout the regions. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much, ICGS 2021, for the opportunity. Back to you, Ma'am Dar.
Okay. Thank you, Miko. Again, to our participants, please reserve your questions until the open forum. And now let me introduce our third plenary speaker. Professor Oni Martinez is an assistant professor at the Department of Geography in the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, UP Diliman, where she teaches GIS and the fundamentals of remote sensing. She is one of the cartographers and GIS analysts at Counter Mapping PH Network. To share her presentation entitled Coming Together Virtually, CAREtographies Towards Democratizing COVID-19 Data. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Oni Martinez. Oni?
Yes, hello, naririnig po ba ako?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. Magandang umaga sa lahat, and I thank the organizers of ICGS for inviting me to be part of the plenary session and to share the stage with good friends Miko and Andy. What I will be sharing with you today is actually on behalf of Dr. Joseph Ballis. We've been working on many stuff. Diba, sir? One of which would be more of an offshoot of the essay that we wrote for a special issue of the Diliman Review, and we thank Diliman Review for that opportunity to write reflections on geospatial data and in the context of experiences and the challenges of COVID-19. That essay centers around CAREtographies in the virus scene, but this time with today's presentation, we will try to reflect more on mutual aid in the context of collaborative mapping and the use of open source tools and data to help address gaps in the decisions and solutions being implemented to respond to the challenges of the pandemic. We will be presenting the works of our fellow mappers here. Yung iba na nabanggit na ni Miko at ni Andy kanina, medyo mas papakita lang natin yung mga halimbawa nung ilan sa mga initiatives ng Ministry of Mapping, MapBex, mental health awareness, at yung kasama din natin sa field na ito, si Ben Hur-Pintor with his work on Stomp COVID-19. So this is with the goal of sharing with our audience the potentials of mapping initiatives done through mutual aid and cooperation to contribute to collaborative learning. And so, yeah, we can move on to the next slide. Malaki yung dagok ng pandemic sa atin. It's been described not just locally but also globally as a global economic crisis and the public health emergency, which hit the most marginalized the hardest. This is according to Birdmore and Gibbons in one of their articles in 2020. The closing down of civic spaces, the imposition of limits to mobility, and the consequent closure of businesses and various institutions and service-oriented activities pose challenges to civic engagement and participation. Community lockdowns entail the suspension of classes, work from home arrangements, the prohibition of gathering and coming together, which are, these are integral elements for flourishing civic participation. Next slide, please. And so the unprecedented challenges of COVID-19 pandemic has exposed communities to much broader risks, and uncertainties in various social dimensions that would be primarily in the areas of or aspects of health, economic sustainability, and governance in general. Containing the spread of SARS-CoV-2 meant the imposition of quarantines and restrictions to movement and in-person interactions, which had consequential impacts on livelihoods, the delivery of basic services, and as mentioned earlier, civic engagement. There were also reports of abuses of the police and other instrumentalities of the state who were tasked to enforce community quarantines. And this would be associated with the what we know as ECQs at iba pang mga forma ng community quarantine. And on the aspect of education, malaki din ang naging dagok sa atin kasi sa kasalukuyan, there's an estimate of 2.6 million children who were forced out of school. They dropped out because of underemployment or loss of jobs of their parents. Malaki yung impact most especially with the private schools because many of the private schools actually closed down last year. Unemployment, another issue, reached 3.7 million in May in 2021, and this is a figure that is higher by 1.3 million than how it was in January of last year. And to make matters worse, the muddled implementation of the emergency subsidy program, or what we call the ESP, or yung tinatawag nating SAP, social amelioration, this also resulted in the failure to deliver assistance to some 369 LGUs because of the problem with inefficient targeting of beneficiaries. So kung titingnan natin itong mga problema natin na ito, next slide please. Malaki yung role ng datos dito, at good quality of data and open data, as mentioned and reiterated earlier by Nico and also Andy, would have been very helpful and in fact integral in making sound decisions to address the pandemic crisis. And amid this crisis, citizens bear the responsibility of protecting themselves against the virus, while the state accountability to poor decisions and ineffective strategies to address the spread of the disease and to mitigate its consequences remains obscure. In effect, we as citizens were answerable to slowing down the pandemic, as we can be penalized for breaching regulations that were put in place. These same sentiments are also shared by other scholars internationally and in other communities, for example, by Adila Arshad Ayas and Ayas Nazim in Quebec in Canada. They also published their work on the impacts of COVID-19. The state demanded obedience and compliance from the citizens, but unfortunately failed to effectively flatten the curve as they have intended, or as intended by the state. Moreover, programs for social welfare and protection, such as in such a difficult situation that we're in, had minimal success in terms of helping the most marginalized and vulnerable. And so the rationale for quarantines and other means to curtail COVID-19 cases should be informed by pertinent data. That's how important data is. We can move on to the next slide. And so data is at the heart of decision-making in the context of a pandemic. You need data for identifying hotspots of COVID-19 cases, data for determining hard-hit areas, combine it with vulnerability studies to really identify alin yung mga maaapektuhang mga komunidad. Data for monitoring allocation of resources in response to the economic and health consequences of COVID-19. Saan natin dinadala ang SAP, yung distribution nito. Maganda sana na imapa din. At may mga may efforts naman in that regard. Data that is already shareable and useful for various types of analysis and approaches, for example, for mapping, epidemiological modeling and simulations, and also katulad ng mga naipakita sa atin din kanina ni Andy at saka ni Nico. However, like the policies implemented in other aspects, data was also likewise problematic. No, alam natin ito. Lalo na nung May last year, no, April, May, no, or March, nag-umpisa yung pag-document ng mga cases. For example, UP COVID-19 Pandemic Response Team, in their policy note in May 2020, they mentioned the following problems with data, no? That there were days when the DOH, Department of Health, did not issue reports, or there were changes in the data, such as changing addresses or the sex of cases, no? Inconsistencies in the coding of regional addresses, which is important for aggregating data para makita natin yung spatial distribution of cases. And in addition, the delay in reporting some cases that are also, the delay hanggang ngayon, ay nakikita pa rin natin na nangyayari. Next slide, please. And so to address data and data governance issues, community initiatives organized around mutual aid, cooperation, and collectivity emerged. Mutual aid, as we describe it here, underscores collaboration and cooperation as acts that are mutually beneficial, both at the individual, no, and the level of the whole species or whole society. This is according to anarchist thinker Peter Kropotkin. And thank you, Sir Joseph Ballis, for introducing me to his work. Scholar Carol Mon Giddings, in the attempt to link Kropotkin's theory of mutual aid with action research. She also interestingly expounded on the significance of experience derived over time, or yung accumulated experience, no, both personal and collective, as the source of knowledge that is integral to human progress and development. So ang ibig sabihin nito ay yung mutual aid, no, leading to the accumulation of experiences over time, no. In the context of the current pandemic, efforts from various collectives and organizations in response to the challenges posed by COVID-19 emerged, which is what Roddy Davis in 2020 calls the upsurge in social action. Nangyari yan dito sa atin, nangyari din yan sa ibang bansa, no? These initiatives are seen to exemplify mutual aid, which he further describes to be concerned with creating structures within which people of similar means or are affected by the issue are able to help one another so that everyone is both a giver and a receiver of help, no? Ito yung mutual aid, no? Dumudugtong to dun sa ideas, no, na pinakilala sa atin ni Peter Kropotkin about being a giver and a receiver at the same time, no? These acts of collaboration and cooperation and associated practices of volunteerism and participation are the same principles that underpin crowdsource mapping, no? And what Andy and Miko shared with us earlier were examples, no, of crowdsourcing or crowdsource mapping. Next slide, please. This was coined by Jeff Howe in 2006 to refer to the act of outsourcing tasks, no, to a larger group. So ibig sabihin malaking grupo yung involved, no, in the generation of data, and these are mostly done voluntarily, no. And as examples, we could give mapathons, hackathons, no, or the activities that were also mentioned by Nico and Andy earlier, no. It is helpful also to note, looking at this, wow, nasira lang yung graph, no, pero what you're looking at is our attempt to combine, no, the idea of a giver and a receiver, no, from the model or parang principles, no, of mutual aid as theorized by and observed, no, by Peter Kropotkin, and at the same time the idea that was introduced by Ritzer in 2008, no, the notion of the prosumer society, where you have a producer, no, of what exists, no, in the Web 2.0, being simultaneously the consumer of what is being produced, and therefore there's a fluid relationship between the producer or the production and the consumption and the producer and the consumer. So this is what he later on mentioned as the prosumer, no, the combination of the consumer and producer. And so at the center of that process, now if we think about it, the collaboration, no, among communities, no, eventually creates, no, collaborative knowledge, or the co-production of collaborative knowledge, no, which is important no, in especially in the context of a pandemic, no, because through cooperation and co-creation, we are able to gain insights and respond to the changing environment through building, no, this collaborative knowledge, right? Or tinatawag ni Alamush and colleagues, no, as collective intelligence. Okay. And so this wisdom, no, the wisdom of the crowd, which emanates from a broad set of backgrounds and knowledges, because you have many participants in the activity, you know, of crowdsourcing or crowdsource mapping, the knowledge base is being enriched, no, by diverse experiences and insights that becomes readily available, no, to be tapped into for solving pressing issues. Because these pressing issues, kailangan silang masagot immediately, no? Time is very, very critical in this. And so that leads to crowd actions, no? What is called crowd actions by Simon and et al. In their publication in 2015. And so amidst the pandemic, we can reclaim, therefore, civic spaces through the democratization of COVID-19 data, one means of which would be crowdsourced mapping. And so in the succeeding slides, I'll be just going through some of the projects, next slide please, that were already mentioned by Nico and Andy as well. No? Kasama dyan yung sa Anyan PH na Pantry map, no? Saan may community pantry, no, yung pangalan nito. At tama yung pagkabanggit ni Miko kanina na it was really a success because during the height of yung exchanges, no, sa social media about community pantries, napakabilis nung pagdagdag ng data, no, kasi in just a matter of days, hundreds of data yung. By data, we mean mga locations, no, ng mga community pantries which were important, no, para maging reference din ng mga tao who are willing to donate at the same time who would like to visit, no, these different community pantries. This was, as mentioned earlier by Nico, I think, an initiative of the Ministry of Mapping, MapBex, Mental Health Awareness, and also the UP Department of Geography, GSUP, no, a student organization of geography students and other geography enthusiasts, no, in the university, and the open mapping community, because there were many volunteers who contributed data to this. And so it was launched in April 2021, and as of, I think, April, no, there were around 800 food pantries all over the country in just a matter of less than a month, no, na naipon yung data na yon. So marami talaga interesado din mismo sa act of mutual aid, no, and looking at it visualized in a map adds value, no, to the data that's being inputted, because at some point we also try to look into the data para malaman kung saan ba nandun ng concentration ng mga community pantries, and we found out of the 300 plus data that we had before, bago umabot ng 800, no, that almost 50% are really located in first-class cities and municipalities. So talaga nakakoncentrate ito sa mga urbanized or urbanizing areas, no? And it would be good to further explore the locations, no, and yung time component din, no, ng spread of the community pantries. Next slide, please. Miko already mentioned this earlier. Miko, naalala mo ba? Ito yung COVID testing map, no, that the MapBex, no, initiated sometime in, kailan ba ito? I think before community pantry. This is last year, right, Nico? So this is mediated by online tools. Ayun, July 2020. And dito makikita natin yung iba-ibang mga testing laboratories, hospitals and health facilities, no. Also the availability of bed capacities and ventilators, ayan, and those very important information, no? And the symbology of the map also indicates deliberate strategies to make the map more accessible to layperson, and also an act of querying, no, of the science, art, and politics of map and map making process. Because if you can see there, meron din silang legend na wala na best, no? So gumagamit ng mas common na lingwahe sa atin para mas madali din tayo makarelate, no, doon sa pinapakita doon sa datos. And yeah, the querying of science, no, and the practice of making the map. Next slide, please. The next slide naman shows us, ito yung isa sa mga mapa ni Andy. The first time we saw this, well, we were very impressed, no? And it has had certain series, no, of revisions. And I think it was updated up until July, if I'm not mistaken, 2020. So it shows us, no, the distribution of cases and some other statistics. A very good visualization, in fact, no, of COVID-19 cases. So that's one thing that, yeah, that was until July. And this is one example, no, na paano natin din, mappers are attempting to address siguro yung design aspect din, no, of how we show and visualize information to make it a lot easier for our audience to understand data. Because understanding data is integral in making decisions, no? And then lastly, in the last slide, we're looking at the STAMP COVID-19 map, or the status tracking overview and mapping of COVID cases map that was made by Ben Pintor, also part of the Ministry of Mapping and the Open Data movement, no, in the Philippines. This was generated in March, almost at the same time the DOH started releasing data. And it was really to make the data siguro more interpretable and readable, with all the necessary statistics there, no, and summaries, no, statistical summaries based on the cases being reported, no, by DOH. And you would remember, kasi at that time then, there was a point when it was very difficult to download the data because it wasn't really open. Right now, it's freely downloadable. No? When I say open, yung madali mo lang siyang ma-integrate din, no, with your mapping tools, with your mapping platform, or with your mapping software, no? Because not all of the time the DOH data was that open. Okay, so this was also one of the attempts to better visualize, no, the distribution of important spatial data. And also at that time, marami ding mga datos na hindi tama yung locations, ano. So alam niyo yun, ang hirap, the responsibility to visualize the data, but then you can see some problems with the data. That puts you in a very difficult situation when you want to help. But then, you know, what can you do when data is not sufficient, no, to be visualized in a manner that will allow us to really see the distribution across the country. And so as conclusion, next slide, please. We'd like to mention here that community initiatives organized around mutual aid and collaboration and collectivity emerge to generate and share useful information and geovisualizations that may help address some of the impacts of the pandemic. But it would be also interesting to explore further how the integration of the principles or values of mutual aid and crowdsource mapping would allow us to reflect on the potentials and perhaps also the risks, no, nabanggit yan ni Miko kanina, no, of this new informational ecosystem, no, na tayo were increasingly shifting into this digital space, especially in the context of the pandemic, no, when you need timely, validated, and georeferenced data that we can openly share across platforms. Despite the limitation of mobilities decreed by the state to prevent the spread of the virus, several initiatives managed to open possibilities for citizens to provide information, data, and statistics to better reflect spatial realities, no? Well, you know, based on experience, naging malaki yung katulungan ng citizens natin, ano, and the mappers, no, in this geovisualization. At the same time, we should always acknowledge the power of the data, no, to influence decisions. And so we also need to ask who creates data, no, and as citizens, no, what is our role in creating this data? Saan ba tayo pumapasok dito, no? And what are the ways data are being used to inform whose decisions? And so that's the last conclusion, that would end our presentation. So thank you, everyone. Looking forward to your questions. Maraming salamat.
Okay, thank you very much, Oni, for your presentation. We will now proceed with the open forum, and we encourage everyone to type in their questions in the Zoom chat box. Okay, anyone who would like to start, kindly address your question to any of our speakers. Is there someone who would like to start? The chat box is already accessible to everyone in the meeting. So you may just type in your question, or maybe you can also unmute and ask your question directly to any of our speakers for today. Okay, so anyone? Okay, I would like to ask a question to Miko. Miko, where do you get your funding for your projects? May I ask?
Secret, ma'am. De, joke lang.
Okay.
Most of the projects po usually started out for free, honestly. Like wala akong budget po talaga. And then eventually there were some support and funding that are usually open through grants internationally. So we usually have the OpenStreetMap Foundation grant, the Hot OSM grant. So madami naman pong grants. And a lot of support din ang natatanggap ng MapBex to continue its processes or yung operations would be coming from donations. And kahit yung simpleng mga, hey, we want to contribute to mapping, Gina po agad yung mga people. So honestly, even without the grants, I do think that MapBex or yung community projects would still be able to move towards that just by the value of the support from the community. Thank you. And I thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Miko. And that's great to hear, no? Okay, we have here a comment from TJ. Let me read it. I can relate with looking at COVID-19 data regarding Ma'am Oni's presentation. While we wanted our COVID-19 data to be as granular as possible, there are still vital information missing. That is, missing data on barangay residents and city or municipality residents. It has a great implication in disease surveillance and the way we monitor cases and how we look at the bigger picture of the outbreak. Okay, Oni, can you comment on that too?
Salamat, TJ, for your comment. Totoo yan, when it comes to surveillance. Kaya lang, syempre din, how much trust do we put sa data collection and how data will be used? Mabuti kung tayo lang yung gumagamit, or the public for the public good. But then we can understand also the level perhaps of mistrust in relation to that. But then another, siguro based din on my personal experience na kaya din tayo, what do you call that, parang hesitant din tayo when it comes to the granularity of the data, is if you would remember during this time, I also tried to create a map showing yung distribution. This was Carto based and yung experts natin dito sa Carto, si Miko tsaka si Andy, unfortunately hindi ako kasing expert nila. I couldn't control the zoom level of the map. And so some people interpreted the locations of the points because I only wanted to show through the animation saan nag-start yung mga cases, tapos paano sila gumalaw through a period of 1 month ata yun. But then I stopped because at some point people were saying sa street pala namin nandun yung cases, ganyan, although it's not true. So sabi ko, oh my God, I was not able. So I eventually took it down dahil, well, it's Carto and eventually it will be paid then. So I had no way of retrieving the data after that, after a while. Pero yun, there's really this risk then that's also what I was trying to say kanina dun sa presentation. There's this risk as well in relation to the granularity of data. Andy is raising her hand. Sige, Andy.
Yes po, ma'am. Same concern din po for me when I first started yung sa COVID-19 map. I think we also asked for your opinion din po dito if we should show up to the barangay level data kasi di ba during that time there were discrimination against people with COVID-19. So parang yung mga magkakapit-bahay, tituro, tapos they would discriminate yung mga nag-positive sa COVID. So we didn't want that to happen. So we did not include that up to provincial level lang po yung ginawa natin na mapping. Yun.
Okay, thank you, Oni and Andy. Yeah, and there's another one here from Mike to Miko. Can you please talk about how your initiatives have been received by LGU or other government agencies you mentioned? And the same question also to Andy and Professor Oni. Did any government officials respond to efforts to visualize COVID data? Maybe we can hear from Miko first.
From the LGUs, I think it was a very big challenge in the beginning because no one really trusted the vision of MapDex, especially in mainstreaming geospatial data and championing LGBT representation towards that. But eventually, when the wheels have been turning and we were getting the attention of other people and the support as well from the international communities, that became a chance for MapBex to really shine, get the spotlight, and talk to this LGU people. So, for example, we mapped 25 towns before that were unmapped. So we reach out to their municipal planning district, municipal planning offices and DRR offices, and then we showcase the benefits of having the data. And currently, they were very happy with the buildings and roads that were mapped in their areas, and they were able to create their own maps towards that. So currently, for example, Tarlac, it's like a give and take relationship. Wherein, okay, we are going to map your whole province, all your roads and your buildings there. But in return, we hope that you could allow us to share a SOGSC or a gender sensitivity training to your LGU employees and things like that. So that's how pretty much MapBex is working with LGUs right now. And yes, I do think we are building better relationships and allies as well within the policymakers through our efforts in also representing the community, especially in various mapping efforts. Yeah, thank you.
Can we hear from Andy?
Yes po. Same din po for mental health awareness. When we first introduced mental health awareness, the mental health awareness map, ayun, so nung una hindi rin masyadong pinapansin, and we also tried reaching out to DOH para may collaborative mapping for mental health services kasi we asked for data rin po. So we asked for data from Philippine Associations of Psychologists. Ayun, nag-respond po sila. So okay yun. And then nung una medyo yun nga po ini-ignore lang, pero as time went by naman, marami na rin collaborations and partnerships with different mental health organizations. And sa LGUs, mga SK, they also ask for trainings on mapping mental health services and also OSM mapping. Pero yung sa COVID naman po, ayun talaga medyo mahirap kasi the data was really difficult to clean. Daily ko siya ginawa nung una. So you have to clean the data, and yung na-mention po ni Ma'am Oni kanina na napansin ng UP sa irregularities ng data. I also recognize that. Tapos ini-email ko sila kasi they have yung email kung saan pwede kang mag-report ng mga changes or mga issues sa data. So I emailed them, and one time I said na yung date recovered and date died nyo po nagkapalit. So please change. Pero walang response. Pero I guess yung kinabukasan naman na data nila is correct na. Baka ayun na yung response nila. So ayun po, yung mga ganung bagay, we say that naman. But on when we post on Facebook yung or social media, kasi we also offer a few analysis din sa data. So siguro parang dito we should focus kasi there are a lot of 65 and above here that are positive. So focus yung vaccination dito, ganyan. So we always tag DOH in our posts. So ayun. Ayun, yung result. Alam niyo na po. So, ayun. So far, ganun naman po yung nangyari. And naging, siguro, I stopped nung around July kasi it was very difficult na to clean the data on a daily basis, especially since very difficult nga siya and maraming errors. And gumanda naman na rin namin yung presentation and yung dashboard mismo the DOH. So, no need, I think there was no need na rin for it to be updated. And there were a lot of other dashboards na rin na nag-emerge nung by July 2020. Yan po.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Oni, you have something to add to that, or Oni?
Siguro po, very briefly lang din, I would just like to mention, but apologies, Mike, this is not real. This is pre-COVID pa, no? But it's the same in the same spirit, I guess. My students, we participated in a competition as validators of data. And so the students had the experience of doing firsthand, no, how data can be validated. And it's really a volunteer, parang effort talaga, no? Kasi sa dami ng mga kailangan mong i-check, no? And the results will have to be disseminated to the students who created the points or the building footprints, etc. No? And so in that process, they were the LGUs, because at first, again, similar to what Andy and Miko said, with OSM data, some LGU were hesitant, no, with the use or with the idea of having students map, no, the areas, because even if they're from there, kasi the idea is you map from your own community. But then, you know, after the project, by the end of the project, the LGUs were actually presenting the data in the conferences. So yun, I guess it's really important to involve, no, them so that they have a better appreciation of open data and how it can benefit their organizations, and also hindi lang in the short run pero in the long run. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Oni. Now to Miko, a question from Daniel. Are there any ethical concerns you have encountered, considered, or concluded regarding crowdsourcing data?
Yeah, of course. Napakalaking problema pa rin ng data ethics din, especially with the open mapping community, because there are some instances that you would think that we're mapping remotely some areas all over the world, especially, for example, remote areas here in the Philippines. And what if those communities do not want to be mapped? So we really make sure that and secure that the LGU, the barangay, and the community themselves are involved in the mapping process, and we have actually consent to continue on the project or the projects that we have. One big thing as well that we are considering, especially in mapping, especially in PLHIV and the map stories, is that we are exposing very vulnerable groups to stigma and discrimination through the mapping that we're doing. But at the same time, we actually screen some of the data and we validate whether the data is useful before we push forward to it. Similarly to OpenStreetMap, there are groups who validate information. So we try to avoid putting out personal names, ages, vulnerable groups on OpenStreetMap, and very sensitive information. Agad-agad din namin dinidelete if there are any attacks, because since our maps are very open, there are chances that they can post anything as well in the platform. So andyan si Andy din who helps me maintain map deck stories. Like in some cases, there are people who just put in and name drop enemies that they have, and we delete it immediately. With regards to ethics, then yeah, it's very important that consent should be valid. So we really value that, especially sa LGBT safe spaces. We get consent from the business owners first before we put them on the map. The process nga, ika nga with that. So we as cartographers and as mappers then, we make sure that there are yung mga ganitong mga safeguards that we put in so that we could also safeguard the identity and yung data sensitivity. Thank you po.
Yeah.
Diba, Annie? Charot.
Thank you, Miko. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. From Dr. Ballis, thank you, Miko, Andy, and Oni for the presentations. Wonderful to listen to these multiple cartographic undertakings that show immense possibilities of mapping from something non-representational as sound by Andy, and then querying of map making, querying as in unsettling orthodoxies in mapping, and the transformative use of maps to help indigent populations. To all panelists, may I ask for your thoughts of the future incarnation of mapping initiatives in the near future? Will it be more democratized as more people take to mapping in their own ways? What backlashes do you think can happen from these endeavors? Who would like to start? That's from Dr. Ballis. Who would like?
Ako na lang po muna.
Okay, Andy, please.
Ayun po. I hope not think, but I hope po that more people would be keen on participatory mapping. So, yung crowd mapping and crowdsourcing. But, yun nga po, as Mika mentioned, yung validation din. So, more volunteers for validating data and for assessing data, what to be shown, or if these places really want to be mapped or really want to be shown on the map, or these people really want to be shown on the map. So more considerations on these factors, but more participatory mapping pa rin po. Yun.
So ayun na nga, na-joke. So ayun na nga, babakapang ko yung sinabi ni Andy. So I do see that the future provides a very bright, so I do think that data would be more democratized in the future, and people would have more access, especially in contributing to the data and using that data to fuel and to support various initiatives. And with the boom of GIS or Geographic Information Systems, I can see that more students are very inclined to, even those who don't have GIS background, are inclined to understand and learn more about mapping and things like that. So I think ang backlash lang na napapansin ko through this democratization is that we might be ano yung term? We might be aggravating other communities through this process if we are not responsible enough in planning our projects, our community, our activities, ganyan. So make sure that may stakeholder mapping lagi. Ayan. Thank you. Go, Ma'am Oni.
Sony.
Dudugtungan ko pa ba? Maraming salamat kay Andy tsaka kay Nico. Sinusundan ko din yung kanilang naging sagot. Siguro, ang isang sa bahagi ko na lang siguro bilang karagdagan, yung synergy din siguro of the disciplines, I think it's very important to involve humanities and for them to become, parang synergistic talaga yung working with the humanities, with artists, with science, social science, these different domains. Kasi that's a good way of taking advantage din of the democratization of data because I believe there will be more creative ways of showing information, mapping that would relate closer to how we experience space. Parang katulad nung example ni Andy kanina about soundscapes, yung creativity na yan sa tingin ko manggagaling yan kung mas yayabong pa yung pagsasama-sama ng mga disiplina towards mapping and the use of maps and generation of spatial information.
And add ko rin po pala doon sa sa backlash. It's related dun sa sinabi ni Ma'am Oni rin for backlash. Related sa sinabi ni Ma'am Oni about dun sa synchronization ng kasi with the technology that we have now and with the open source software that we can use, a lot of people can learn mapping and GIS easily. Pero alam niyo yung mga tao nagsasabi na pag GIS, click lang. Pero if, yung ganun, if there is indeed synergy with in humanities and how we can reach out to the communities and yung uh, lessons behind the GIS and how we can analyze the data. Hindi lang siya basta click lang eh. So if there is that, may iwasan yung mga ganun na perception na ganyan lang yun. You just simply show this and that's it. Yun lang naman po.
Okay, thank you. Kagaya nga ng sinabi ni Miko dito sa chat, no? Walang kwenta yung mga data and maps natin if di siya ma-appreciate or magagawa nating makatao yung data. Yes, now we have one last question. And this is a challenge, no, from Takashi Chuji. How can geography contribute to people or society beyond making visual maps in COVID situation? Does geography have powers to change the situation? Thank you. Who wants to start? Maybe Oni?
Bigat. Thank you. Thank you, Sir Takashi Tsuji, for your question. This is I think this requires quite a complex answer, but siguro what I want to just share or emphasize would be we can use geography and its perspectives and approaches in coming up with solutions. And there's no grand solution kasi the solution also depends on the will of those who have the capacity to implement policies and to enforce solutions o kung ano man. Pero I guess with continuously collaboration with communities and the different stakeholders, geography is a powerful tool. No, but then not only geography. There's so many other factors siguro then to think about and to empower, in the process of coming up with solutions with COVID. I'm sorry that's the only answer that I can give for now. But thank you for the question, really.
Do you want to add to that, Andy and Miko?
I think po, yan naman, definitely geography has the powers to change the situation or to contribute more beyond visual maps lang, especially, for example, kay Miko, Mapbex, they encourage conversations and about LGBTQIA+, and yung safe spaces for mapping, for mental health awareness. Then we also, through geography and our maps, we were also able to encourage people to seek help for their mental health. Kasi beyond the visuals of saan makikita yung mga services, they were also able to know where they could safely talk to or where their concerns will be entertained ng walang judgment, and also encourage them in conversations about mental health to fight the stigma against it. And yung sa COVID din po, I think yung mga analysis nga na pinapakita or we offer to people, and especially if we're just talking about the COVID-19 situation in the Philippines, the fact that they see that there were a lot, even during early 2020 when the pandemic started, even seeing na there were a lot of cases already in our place naman na pala. We can see already na people will be more aware or more helpful for their communities, especially if they see that there are already a lot of positive cases in their places here.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Miko, you have a short rejoinder? Go ahead.
I would agree with contestant number 1 and contestant number 2. And I think geography offers a lot of space to work with. Similarly, like since COVID is a very epidemiological, so it's very rooted to space and place, and it's spread throughout it. I think geography will pretty much provide solutions and a different perspective on how these things can go about. But yeah, I do agree with Miss Martinez that uh, it would be totally up to those who are in power if they would want to use it. But yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to add to that, no? I think the power is in putting geography to work. Okay, we just have to make use of our capacity as geographers to address these issues. Okay, so I want to thank all our three plenary speakers this morning. Thank you very much for those lectures and interesting, no? Interesting presentations. So from soundscapes, no, to data, and also how we can handle COVID data with care, no? And then I think we have a lot of responsibility in contributing, no? In making sure that the data that we are using, as well as the data we are handling, no, is also handled with great care. Okay, so that ends our open forum. If you have further questions, you may directly contact our speakers if you want to connect with them. And you can get their contact information, I think, with your registration materials. Okay, so to show our appreciation, to our speakers, the organizers of the ICGS would like to give certificates of appreciation. So allow me to read the certificate of appreciation. This is presented to Sandra Tabinas as plenary speaker at the International Conference on Geographical Studies 2021, Geographies of Care, Lives, Specialities, Experiences, and Practices, held virtually on November 5th, 2021 at the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy, University of the Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City, Philippines. Signed by our two coordinators, Bernardo Arellano III and Fernand Francis M. Hermoso, and our president of the Philippine Geographical Society, Emmanuel B. Garcia, and the chair of the Department of Geography, Joseph Ballis. Okay, so that's for Sandra or Andy. And then we also have for Miko with the same signatories, no? And for Maria Simeona Martinez or Oni with the same signatories. Okay, thank you very much to everyone for participating. And before